The moment the message changed to delivered, Adanna's blood ran completely cold. The text, "Darling, my body is ready. Come home now," was supposed to go to her boyfriend, Jude, who had been ghosting her and ignoring her calls for 5 days. Instead, she stared in pure horror as the recipient's name flashed on her screen. "Do not contact Cho Kang Tha," the private number of Seoul's most terrifying, untouchable mafia boss, a man who hadn't laughed in 5 years. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then 3 little dots appeared. The response that came through made her drop her phone. "I don't know who you are, but you just made a very interesting mistake. Don't move. I am tracing this number." Before we dive into the story, quickly drop a comment and tell me where exactly you are watching from. Is it Dallas, Chicago, New York City, Toronto, London, or anywhere else in the world? I love seeing where my people are. Now, if you love drama, dark romance, and stories that will have you screaming at your screen, kindly hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so you never miss any upload. Trust me, you are going to want to see how this ends. Now let's get into it. Adanna was not a woman who fell apart. 27 years of life had made absolutely certain of that. She had grown up in Houston in the kind of neighborhood where falling apart was simply not an option, where you kept your voice steady and your face unreadable even when everything underneath was on fire. Where survival did not belong to the loudest or the most dramatic. It belonged to whoever could pull themselves together the fastest. She had carried that lesson with her across an entire ocean. 3 years ago, she had stepped off a plane at Incheon International Airport with 2 suitcases, a business plan she had rewritten 11 times, and exactly $4,000 sitting in her account. No connections, no family waiting, no Korean beyond what she had spent 14 hours on a plane teaching herself from a textbook balanced on her knees. Just her mind, her nerve, and a stubbornness that her mother had spent years simultaneously praising and complaining about. She had built everything else herself. Adana Events was now the highest-rated event planning company in Gangnam. She had coordinated private galas for politicians whose names appeared in history books, product launches for companies worth more than small countries, intimate dinners for people so powerful they had stopped needing last names. She spoke Korean with the kind of fluency that still surprised people when it came out of her mouth. She wore her natural hair in thick braids, pinned elegantly at the nape of her neck, dressed like she belonged in every expensive room she walked into, and had never once let anyone in the city make her feel small. She was not a woman who fell apart. But right now, standing barefoot in her kitchen with her phone face up on the cold marble floor and her hands pressed flat against the counter to stop them from shaking. She was somewhere very close to the edge. She had saved his number exactly 3 months ago. She remembered every detail of the night it happened. One of the most exclusive private events she had ever been hired to coordinate. A gathering held in a penthouse so elevated above Seoul that the city below had looked like a jewelry box spilled open across black velvet. The brief she received had been unusual. No full guest list. No photographs permitted. And one specific instruction written in bold at the bottom of the page. Do not engage directly with the guest at the primary table unless spoken to first. She had broken that instruction within the first 20 minutes, not intentionally. Her server, a quiet university student named Hannah, who had only been with her company for 3 weeks, had caught her heel on the edge of a chair near the primary table. A full glass of red wine had landed directly on the sleeve of a suit that Adana was almost certain cost more than her rent. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight. She had looked up and seen him for the first time. Cho Kang Tha, seated at the head of the table like a man who had never once in his life needed to raise his voice to command a room. Tall, even sitting down. Sharp jaw, dark hair pushed back from his face, and eyes so deep and measured. They looked less like eyes, and more like the surface of water before something moved beneath it. 2 bodyguards had already materialized behind Hannah, hands closing around the girl's arms before she had even straightened up. Adana had moved before her brain caught up with her body. She crossed the room, stepped directly between the bodyguards and her server, and looked Cho Kang Tha straight in the eyes. She made a mistake, Adana said, her voice not shaking even slightly. It was an accident. Please let her go. The room had gone so still she could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass 3 tables away. Later that night, no fewer than 4 people would find separate moments to pull her aside and explain, with varying levels of barely contained panic, exactly what she had just done, who she had just spoken to. What men like Cho Kang Tha did to people who addressed them that way uninvited. But standing in front of him in that moment, Adana had simply held his gaze and waited. He had looked at her for a long time. Deliberate. Unreadable. The kind of look that felt like being taken apart and examined piece by piece. Then, without a word to his bodyguards, he had lifted one hand. Barely a movement at all. And they had released Hana instantly. He had reached into his jacket, produced a small black card, portraying and held it out across the table. "You have fire," he said, his voice so quiet it moved through the air like smoke. "If you ever need anything, use this number." She had taken the card, gone home, entered the number into her phone and stared at it for a long time before typing the only contact name that felt honest. Do not contact. Cho Kang Tha. A reminder, a boundary, a line drawn in permanent ink between herself and a world she had no business touching. And tonight, because of 5 days of silence from a man who was supposed to love her, she had crossed it. Her phone buzzed from the floor. She picked it up slowly. "I'm waiting for you to explain yourself. Or don't. Either way, I already know your name, Adana." Her stomach dropped. She typed back with fingers that were steadier than she felt. "Wrong number. Please ignore that message. It was meant for someone else. I am so sorry. Please do not trace anything. Just forget this happened." 3 dots. Then, nobody saves a number as do not contact by accident. "You wanted my attention. Now you have it." Before she could respond, "I'll be at your door in 10 minutes. Adana set her phone down on the counter. She walked slowly to her window and looked out at Seoul. 10 million lights stretching in every direction. The city enormous and glittering and completely indifferent to the fact that her life was currently unraveling in real time. 10 minutes. She thought about calling Jude one more time. Then she looked at her call log. 14 unanswered calls over 5 days. She put the phone in her pocket. Then she walked to her front door and waited. The doorbell rang at exactly 11 p.m. Adana had been standing 3 feet from the door for the last 4 minutes. She knew because she had watched every single one of them tick by on the clock above her kitchen counter, her arms crossed over her chest, her breathing slow and deliberate the way her grandmother had taught her when she was 9 years old and the world felt too large and too dangerous. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The doorbell rang again. She looked through the peephole, and every breathing technique she had ever learned abandoned her completely. Cho Kang Tha stood in her hallway like he had been placed there by someone who understood exactly how much space a man like him needed to fill in order to be fully terrifying. He was in all black, a tailored suit that sat on his frame with the kind of precision that suggested it had been made for him and nothing else. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, his hands were in his pockets, and he was completely, utterly composed. Not the composure of someone waiting, the composure of someone who had already decided how everything was going to go. 2 bodyguards stood behind him, massive and silent as walls. Adana pulled back from the peephole, pressed her back against the door, closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened the door. The first thing that reached her was his scent. Expensive cologne, something dark and cedarwood deep, with an undercurrent that she could not name, but that her nervous system recognized immediately as danger. The second thing was his eyes. Even darker in person than she remembered. Fixed on her face with an attention so complete and focused it felt almost physical, like a hand pressing gently but firmly against her sternum. He looked at her the way people looked at things they had been thinking about for a long time. "You answered," he said. His voice was lower than she remembered, quieter, the kind of quiet that did not need volume because the room was always already listening. "You rang my doorbell at 11 p.m., Adana replied, keeping her voice completely even. "Did I have a choice?" Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the suggestion of one. There is always a choice. "Then I chose to get this over with." She held the door but did not step aside. "What do you want, Mr. Cho?" His eyes moved over her once, her silk head wrap, like her oversized university sweatshirt. her bare feet on the marble floor, and returned to her face without a single change in expression. To talk. People who want to talk call first. I did. You save my number as do not contact. Adana had absolutely nothing to say to that. She stepped aside. He walked into her apartment the way he had stood in her hallway, like the space had already agreed to belong to him before he arrived. He moved through her living room slowly, not touching anything, but seeing everything. The framed photo of her mother on the bookshelf, the business awards lined neatly along the windowsill, the corkboard above her desk covered in event layouts and fabric swatches and color-coded timelines. He turned back to face her. "Leave us," he said to his bodyguards, and the door closed behind them without another word. Adana stayed where she was near the entrance. I didn't say they could leave. I did. He sat down on her couch with the ease of a man who had never once in his life asked permission to sit anywhere. "Come, sit down, Adana. I'll stand." That measured look again. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced his phone. He turned the screen toward her. "Do you know this man?" She crossed the room slowly and looked at the screen. It was Jude. Her Jude, in a restaurant she did not recognize, at a table lit with low, warm light. He was leaning forward across the table, both hands wrapped around the hands of a Korean woman who was laughing at something he had just said. The way she was laughing, the way he was looking at her. The timestamp in the corner of the photo read 2 days ago. Adana stared at the image for a long time without speaking. "Her name is Park Seo-yeon," Cho Kang Tha said, his voice clinical and even, the way a doctor delivered results they had been expecting. "Her father is a mid-level city councilor. She and your boyfriend have been together for 6 months. He has already chosen a ring. He plans to propose before the end of this month." The apartment was very quiet. 6 months, Adana said. Her voice came out remarkably steady. She was almost impressed by herself. 6 months? He confirmed. She handed the phone back without looking at him, walked to her window, looked out at the city that had become her home. The city that was apparently large enough for Jude to build an entire second life inside without her noticing a single thing. Half their relationship, half of 2 years, and every dinner where he had seemed distracted. Every weekend he had a reason to leave early. Every time she had told herself she was overthinking it. She had not been overthinking it. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her back still to him. "Because you deserve to know. You don't know me. I know enough." She heard him stand, heard the quiet shift of expensive fabric as he moved. "I know you built everything in this apartment with your own hands. I know you have called that man 14 times in 5 days and he has not answered once. I know you are standing at that window right now refusing to cry in front of a stranger, and I know that is costing you something." Adana turned around. He was closer than she expected. Not crowding her. There was still space between them, but close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. This close she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the faint shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes that his careful composure almost disguised. "Why have you been watching me?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a moment. Then, 3 months ago, you walked across a room full of people who were terrified of me and you looked me in the eyes without flinching, without performing bravery. You were simply unafraid. A pause. I have not been able to explain it since. "I was afraid," Adana said honestly. "I was absolutely terrified." "I know." Something moved behind his eyes. That made it more remarkable, not less. The silence between them changed texture, became something slower and more careful. "Oh, have dinner with me," he said. Adana blinked. That sounded like a command. It was. Then no. He looked at her for a long moment, then, so quietly it was almost to himself. "Adana, ask me properly." Another long pause. Something that looked almost like effort crossed his face, as though the words required muscles he had not used in years. Then, "Would you have dinner with me? Please." Despite everything, Jude's face on that phone screen, the bodyguards outside her door, the complete absurdity of this entire evening, Adana felt something loosen slightly in her chest. "One dinner," she said. "I choose the restaurant." "Done." He moved toward the door, then stopped without turning around. His things will be gone by morning. I didn't ask you to do that. No. He glanced at her over his shoulder. And for just a moment, his expression was something she did not have a word for yet. But I am doing it anyway. Then he was gone. The door closed with a soft, heavy click. Adana stood in the middle of her living room in the silence he left behind. Jude's betrayal was a dull weight in her chest, real and heavy and waiting to be properly felt. But beneath it, quieter and more unsettling, was something else entirely. She was already thinking about what to wear to dinner. She chose a restaurant that had absolutely no business being on any list Cho Kang Tha had ever eaten from. Mama Seo's was a small Nigerian-Korean fusion spot tucked into a narrow street in Itaewon that Adana had discovered 8 months ago entirely by accident. When she had taken a wrong turn after a client meeting and followed the smell of fried plantain through a doorway covered by a beaded curtain, the owner, an older Korean woman who had spent 12 years married to a Nigerian diplomat, cooked jollof rice with gochujang and served egusi soup alongside soft tofu stew. The tables were mismatched. The chairs did not all have the same number of legs. The lighting came from strings of yellow bulbs looped across the low ceiling that made everything look warm and slightly unreal. It was Adana's favorite place in all of Seoul. She had chosen it deliberately. If Cho Kang Tha wanted to have dinner with her, he was going to have it in her world, not his. He arrived at 7:58 in a car so dark and silent it seemed to absorb the street around it. He stepped out in a charcoal suit. He looked at the narrow entrance to Mama Seo's with its beaded curtain and hand-painted sign, and walked through the door without a single change in expression. His bodyguard stayed outside. Adana was already at the corner table she always requested, her natural hair loose tonight in thick coils that framed her face, wearing a deep burgundy dress that she had bought for herself after landing her first major Seoul contract and had worn exactly once since. She watched him scan the room, find her, and cross toward her with that same quiet certainty he seemed to bring to every space he entered. He sat down across from her, looked at the handwritten menu on the small chalkboard above the kitchen counter, then looked back at her. I have never eaten any of this, he said. I know. She handed him the printed menu anyway. That is the point. Something flickered in his eyes. He looked down at the menu. When the food arrived, jollof rice with crispy bottom, fried plantain glistening with caramelized edges, a bowl of pepper soup fragrant with uziza leaves and just enough gochugaru to make itself interesting. Adana watched Cho Kang Tha look at his plate the way she imagined generals looked at maps, assessing, deliberate, committing before acting. He picked up his fork, took his first bite of jollof rice. The reaction was small, just a fractional pause, a slight widening of his eyes before his expression resettled. But Adana had been watching for it, and she caught every bit of it. Well, she said, this is... He paused, seeming to search for a word adequate enough. Remarkable. I know. She smiled for the first time that evening. But wait until you try the plantain. It was the plantain that finally did something to his face. Not a full smile. But the lines around his mouth shifted, softened, rearranged themselves into something that on any other man she would have called delight. You look almost human right now, Adana said. I have been told I can pass, he replied, and she laughed, a real one, surprised out of her before she could decide whether to give it. He looked at her when she laughed, looked at her the way he seemed to look at everything, completely without apology, like her face was information he was collecting and storing carefully. The walls came down slowly, the way they always did when food was involved. When the pepper soup arrived and Adana wrapped both hands around her bowl and closed her eyes for one involuntary second at the first sip, like something shifted between them, became less careful, more real. Tell me about Busan, she said. He looked up. What do you know about Busan? Nothing. That is why I am asking. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my father was a fisherman. My mother made clothing from home and sold it at the market on weekends. We were poor in the way that is quiet and constant, not dramatic, just always there, but they were happy people. A pause. I did not understand how rare that was until it was gone. How old were you? Adana asked softly. 15. His jaw tightened slightly. A local organization had been taxing the fishermen for years. Protection money. My father refused to pay it for the third consecutive month. They made an example of him. He said it simply, the way you said things you had long since finished crying about. My mother was gone 6 months later. The doctor said her heart. I knew better. The restaurant moved quietly around them. Cutlery, low conversation, the sound of something sizzling in the kitchen. I joined the organization that killed him. Cho Kang Tha continued. Worked until I was trusted. Then I took everything they had built and I burned it from the inside out. Every contact, every asset, every man who had given the order. He looked at her steadily. I built what I have now on what was left of their ashes. Revenge, Adana said quietly. Survival, he replied. Revenge was just the foundation. Does that distinction matter to you? He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. It used to. Less so now. His gaze held hers directly. Does it matter to you? Adana thought about it honestly. It makes me sad, she said finally. You were 15 years old and you lost everything. What you built after that, I understand it. But I am sad for the boy who thought that was the only way. Cho Kang Tha looked at her for a long moment without speaking. No one has ever said that to me, he said finally. What do they usually say? Nothing. They do not ask. Then they were not paying attention. Something moved behind his eyes. Deep and slow, like a tide shifting far below a surface. He reached across the table and his fingers brushed against the back of her hand. Barely contact at all, lighter than intention, more than accident. Adana did not pull away immediately. She let it sit for 3 seconds. Then she moved her hand back to her bowl. Your turn, he said. So she told him, Houston. Satki. The apartment where the hot water worked 3 days out of 7. Her mother working double shifts at the hospital and still finding time to press Adana's uniform every morning. The teacher in 10th grade who had handed back her business proposal assignment with a C and the words unrealistic ambitions written in red across the top. The scholarship she had applied for 11 times before it came through. Seoul. The $4,000, the 11 rewrites. I have never told anyone all of that, she said when she finished. Not completely. Not even Jude? Especially not Jude. She looked at her hands. He never asked the right questions. I am asking. I noticed. Her phone screen lit up on the table between them. She glanced at it before she could stop herself. An unknown number. A single line of text. Ask him about Sun Ye. The blood moved differently through her body for one moment. She looked up. Cho Kang Tha's eyes were already on her face. He had seen the notification land even if he could not read it. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, Adana said, turning the phone face down. Fine. But the name was already inside her head now. Sitting there quietly, waiting. Sun Ye. She did not ask. Not tonight. Tonight she folded the question carefully and put it somewhere she could find it later. When they stepped outside afterward, the Itaewon street was alive around them. Neon and music and the smell of street food and night air. His car was waiting at the curb. He walked her to the entrance of the restaurant and stopped. He did not move to kiss her, did not reach for her hand. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him in the cool night air, and looked at her in that way he had, complete and steady, and like she was the only thing in his entire field of vision. Same time tomorrow? He said quietly. Adana looked at him for a long moment. She did not say yes, but she did not say no, and from the way his expression settled, and that almost shift at the corner of his mouth, he understood exactly what that meant. Okay, Adana is in that restaurant having dinner with the most dangerous man in Seoul, and something tells me this is not going to stay simple for very long. If you are loving this story so far, drop a comment and let me know. And tell me, do you trust Cho Kang Tha yet? Because I am not sure I do. And if you have not already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. We are just getting to the good part, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks was not enough time to fall in love. Adana knew this. She was a practical woman, a woman who had built everything she owned on logic and discipline and the deliberate refusal to let her heart move faster than her head. She knew better than most that feelings were not facts, that intensity was not the same as depth, and that the most dangerous thing a person could do was confuse the two. 3 weeks was not enough time to fall in love, and yet, he texted her every morning without exception. Not long messages. Cho Kang Tha was not a man of unnecessary words, just small, precise things. A photo of the sunrise over Han River taken from wherever he was at 6 a.m. A single line asking if she had eaten. Once, and only once. Yeah, a voice note that lasted 11 seconds in which he said nothing except her name, and then told her to have a good day, in which she had listened to 4 times before deleting it because it made her feel something she was not ready to name out loud. He came to her events. Not officially. He never announced himself or disrupted anything. But twice in the past 3 weeks, she had looked up from directing her team across a crowded venue and found him standing near the back wall in his dark suit, arms crossed, watching her work with an expression that she was beginning to recognize as the closest thing he had to open admiration. When she confronted him about it the second time, he had simply said, "You are remarkable at what you do. I wanted to see it." She had told him he was impossible. He had agreed without any sign of distress. And they had eaten dinner together 6 more times. Always her choice of restaurant. Always somewhere that felt like her world rather than his. A small ramyun shop in Mappo where they sat on plastic stools, and Adana taught him to properly appreciate the specific comfort of 3 a.m. noodles. A rooftop barbecue spot in Hongdae where she had laughed so hard at something he said that the couple at the next table had turned to stare. A quiet corner of a Haitian-Korean bakery in Yongsan where they had sat for 4 hours over coffee and pastries and talked about everything and nothing until the owner had started pointedly stacking chairs. He had not kissed her, had not pushed, had not asked for anything she had not already chosen to give. What he had done was see her, and completely and consistently, and without any apparent agenda beyond the simple fact of her. And Adana, who had spent 2 years with a man who looked through her, was finding that being truly seen was more disorienting than she had expected. 3 weeks was not enough time to fall in love, but it was apparently enough time to get dangerously close. The charity gala was one of the largest events her company had ever coordinated. A fundraiser for a children's literacy foundation, held in the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel in Yeonggu, with 400 guests, a live orchestra, a 12-course dinner, and a silent auction that her team had spent 3 weeks curating. Adana had been on site since 7 a.m. By 8 p.m., when the guests began arriving in their gowns and dark suits. She was running entirely on her 3rd coffee and the particular focused energy that came from doing something she was genuinely extraordinary at. She was directing her team through earpiece, moving through the ballroom with her clipboard and her best professional composure when someone stepped into her path. "You must be Adana." She stopped. The man in front of her was handsome. Sharply so, in a way that registered before she could decide whether she wanted it to. Similar bone structure to Cho Kang Tha. The same angular jaw, the same dark eyes. But where Cho Kang Tha's presence carried weight, this man's ease carried something else entirely. Something that smiled with its mouth while its eyes stayed perfectly, carefully neutral. "I am," she said. "And you are?" "Cho Ryu." He tilted his head. Something like amusement playing at his lips. "Kang Tha's younger brother. I have been wanting to meet you for some time." Adana kept her expression professional. "This is a private event, Mr. Cho. Are you on the guest list?" "I have a way of getting into rooms I am not invited to." He fell into step beside her as she moved, casually, as though she had extended an invitation. "My brother speaks very highly of you." "Well, he does not speak of you at all, actually." "Which, for Kang Tha, is the same thing." "I am working," Adana said evenly. "If you will excuse me, he has not told you about Sun Ye." She stopped walking. Ryu was watching her with those carefully neutral eyes and that mouth that would not stop almost smiling. "I can see from your face that he has not." Interesting. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Sun Ye," Ryu repeated, as though the name were something he was placing down between them like a card on a table. "She was my brother's fiancée, 5 years ago. She was 3 months pregnant when she died. He paused, very suddenly, very conveniently. The ballroom continued around them, crystal glasses catching light, the orchestra warming up, guests moving through the space completely unaware. Adana kept her face absolutely composed. "What are you implying?" she said quietly. Ryu reached into his jacket and produced his phone. He turned the screen toward her. A photograph. A young Korean woman, beautiful, visibly pregnant, smiling at the camera with the particular full happiness of someone who believed the best was still ahead of her. Her name was Park Sun-ye, Ryu said. She died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning in March. The investigation was closed within a week. His eyes fixed on Adana's. "My brother is very good at closing things quickly when he wants them closed." "Get away from me," Adana said. Her voice was low and completely controlled. "I just think you deserve to know what you are walking into." Ryu pocketed his phone and straightened his jacket. "Everyone who has ever loved my brother has ended up with nothing. Or worse." He smiled one final time, that smile that lived entirely on the surface of his face and nowhere underneath it. "You seem like a woman who has worked too hard to end up as nothing." He walked away into the crowd and disappeared. Adana stood in the middle of her ballroom with her earpiece crackling with her team asking for directions and her clipboard in her hand. But she finished the event. She directed every course, managed every transition, handled a minor crisis with the silent auction display at 9:45 with complete composure, and smiled at every guest who complimented the evening's coordination. She did not allow herself to think about Sun-ye until the last guest had left and her team was beginning breakdown, and she was standing alone in the service corridor outside the ballroom with her clipboard against her chest and the sound of the orchestra packing up filtering through the walls. Then she took out her phone and called Cho Kang Tha. He answered on the second ring. "Adana, I need to see you," she said. "Tonight." A brief pause. "Are you all right?" "I will be," she said. "After you tell me who Sun-ye is." The silence on his end lasted 4 seconds. She counted them. "I will be there in 20 minutes, he said. His voice had changed. Not colder exactly. Heavier, like something had settled into it. "Do not go anywhere alone." He arrived in 19. She was waiting in the hotel lobby, still in her work clothes, her braids pinned back, her face showing nothing. He crossed the lobby toward her and she could see it immediately. Something had shifted in him the moment she had said that name. The guarded weight he always carried had deepened into something darker, more careful. They found a quiet corner. He sat across from her, and for the first time since she had met him, Cho Kang Tha looked like a man carrying something very heavy. "Your brother came to my event tonight," Adana said. "He told me about Sun-ye. He showed me a photograph." Cho Kang Tha's jaw tightened. What else did he say?" "He implied that you had her killed." She held his gaze steadily. "I want to hear the truth from you." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of everything except the words themselves. "Sun-ye was the woman I was going to marry. She was 3 months pregnant with our child. And she was murdered." He paused. "By Ryu." Adana's breath stilled. He was consumed by it. The fact that our father had chosen me. That everything would pass to me and nothing to him. Sun-ye was the only thing in my life that was not about power or empire or survival. She was just... He stopped, started again. She was just mine, and Ryu knew that if he took her, he took the only thing that could break me. "Did it?" Adana asked softly. "Break you?" "For 2 years. His eyes met hers directly. I did not laugh for 5 years. I did not sit across a table from another person and want to know them. I did not... He stopped again, and this time the pause was longer. I did not feel anything worth feeling until a woman walked across a room and looked me in the eyes and demanded I show mercy. The hotel lobby was quiet around them. "Why didn't you tell me?" Adana asked. "Because it is my greatest failure," he said simply. "I could not protect her. I could not protect our child. And I have lived inside that every day for 5 years." His voice dropped even quieter. "And now Ryu has seen you, which means he knows you matter to me, which means I am in danger." Adana finished. "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment, at the weight in his eyes, and knew at the way he was sitting across from her like a man bracing for her to stand up and leave. You should walk away, he said quietly. I would understand it. I would not... A pause. I would not blame you. Cho Kang Tha, Adana said. Yes. If you tell me to walk away one more time, she said evenly, I am going to be very annoyed with you. Something broke open in his expression. Just for a moment, raw and unguarded and completely real. He reached across and took her hand, and this time she let him. No more secrets, he said. No more secrets, she agreed. What neither of them knew, what they could not have known as they sat together in that quiet lobby corner, his hand over hers, the weight of Sunya's ghost finally spoken aloud between them, was that 2 floors above, in a hotel room booked under a name that did not exist, Cho Ryu was sitting in the dark watching a live feed from a small camera he had placed in Adanna's apartment 3 days ago. He watched them through the lobby camera on his laptop screen, watched his brother's hand cover hers, watched Adanna's expression soften in a way that told him everything he needed to know. He closed the laptop, picked up his phone, and made a call. They took her on a Thursday. Adanna had stayed late at her office in Gangnam, the way she always did after a major event, running post-event reports, responding to client feedback, making notes on what her team could sharpen for next time. It was the unglamorous part of the work that nobody saw, the quiet hours after the chandeliers and the applause, and she had always found a particular peace in them. She stepped out of the building at 10:47 p.m. The street was not empty. It never was in Gangnam, even at this hour. There were other offices still lit, a convenience store on the corner, a couple walking a small dog on the opposite pavement. Adanna had her bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand, a voice note from her mother half listened to in her earbuds when the black van pulled up alongside her. It happened in 4 seconds. The side door opened. 2 men, hands on her arms before she could process the movement, her bag hitting the pavement, her phone skidding across the concrete. She opened her mouth and one of them said something low and sharp in Korean that told her very clearly that screaming would be the wrong decision. She felt the needle before she saw it. A small cold sting at the side of her neck. Then the street, the lights, the convenience store. But the couple with the small dog, all of it tilted sideways and went dark. She came back slowly, sound first, the distant drip of water, the low hum of something industrial, the occasional creak of a large space settling around itself. Then cold, the particular cold of concrete beneath her and metal against her wrists. Her arms pulled behind her and secured to the back of a chair with something that bit into her skin when she tested it. She did not test it again. She filed that information and kept still. She opened her eyes. A warehouse. High ceilings lost in shadow above her. Bare concrete walls. A row of industrial lights strung at uneven intervals that cast more shadow than illumination. The smell of rust and damp and something chemical underneath it all. And Cho Ryu, standing 10 feet in front of her with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the elbow, watching her come back to consciousness with the patient expression of a man who had been waiting and did not mind the wait. Good morning, he said pleasantly, or evening. I have honestly lost track. Adanna said nothing. She was taking inventory, her body, her restraints, the room, the exits she could see, the ones she could not. Staying inside her own head, staying practical. You are remarkably calm, Ryu observed, tilting his head slightly. Most people wake up in a place like this and immediately start crying or bargaining. You are just looking around. Something like genuine appreciation crossed his face. I really do understand what he sees in you. What do you want? Adana said. Her voice came out steady. My brother. Ryu crouched down to her eye level, his forearms resting on his knees, his expression conversational and completely relaxed. He will come for you. He cannot help it. That is the problem with Kang Tha. He has always loved things more than they are worth, and it has always cost him. He reached out and pressed 2 fingers lightly against her jaw, turning her face slightly. When he gets here, I am going to make him watch while I take everything from him again. And this time, he will not recover. Adana held his gaze without flinching. You are going to regret this. I doubt that sincerely. I don't. Ryu studied her for a moment longer. Then he stood, producing a knife from somewhere, turning it once in his hand with the casual ease of someone very familiar with the weight of it. What he pressed the flat of the blade against her cheek, cold and deliberate, and watched her face. She gave him nothing. He smiled. Remarkable, he said again, almost to himself. Then the warehouse doors came off their hinges. It was not loud the way she expected. There was a sharp concussive sound, a rush of air, and then light, real light, flooding in from outside, and figures moving through the smoke with the kind of organized precision that suggested this had been planned down to its smallest detail. A dozen men at least, moving to positions around the warehouse perimeter with weapons raised and not a single wasted movement between them. And at the center of it, walking through the smoke like it had parted specifically for him, was Cho Kang Tha. He was not running. He did not look frantic or desperate or afraid. But he walked with the same measured certainty he brought to every room he entered, his dark eyes already fixed on her face, scanning her quickly, checking, assessing, cataloging, before they moved to his brother. "Ryu," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Step away from her." Ryu straightened. That pleasant expression had not changed. He took one step sideways and pressed the blade against Adanna's throat instead, his free hand closing over her shoulder. "One more step, brother," Ryu said conversationally, "and I open her throat. Put your weapons down." Cho Kang Tha stopped moving. For the first time since Adana had known him, she saw something move across his face that was not control or carefully managed distance. It was fear. Not for himself. She understood that immediately and completely. It was the specific, devastating fear of someone looking at the thing they cannot afford to lose. His men stopped. Weapons stayed up, but nobody moved. "This is between us," Cho Kang Tha said, his voice steady even now. "It has always been between us. Let her go, and we end this the way it should have been ended years ago." "But that is the point," Ryu said. "It is not between us anymore. That is what you never understood, Kang Tha. You keep finding things to love, and I keep having to remind you what that costs." Adana's eyes found Cho Kang Tha's across the warehouse. She had been thinking since she woke up in the chair, thinking through the restraints in the inventory and Ryu's monologue and the distance between her and the nearest exit. She had been measuring and calculating and waiting for the precise right moment with the focused patience of a woman from Houston who had learned very early that panic was a luxury she could not afford. The moment was now. She held Cho Kang Tha's gaze for exactly 1 second. She saw him see her. She saw him understand that something was about to happen and that his job was to be ready for it. She let her entire body go limp. Not gradually, completely, instantly, all at once, like a puppet with its strings cut. The dead weight of her dropping pulled Ryu's knife hand down and sideways, his grip on her shoulder breaking as he lurched to compensate. And in the half-second of his imbalance, Adana snapped her head back and up with everything she had. The crack of impact was loud, but pain exploded white across her vision and she heard Ryu's nose break before she felt herself toppling sideways, chair and all, hitting the concrete hard on her shoulder. It hurt enormously. She did not care even slightly. Cho Kang Tha moved. She could not see exactly what happened from the floor. She was working on getting her wrists free from the restraints, twisting and pulling with focused urgency, but she heard it. The sounds of it were brief and specific and final. Then silence. Then Cho Kang Tha was crouching beside her, a blade in his hand, cutting through her restraints in 3 clean movements. His hands found her face immediately, both palms cupping her jaw, his eyes moving over her quickly, checking every inch. "Your shoulder," he said. "I'm fine." "You hit concrete from 3 feet?" "I have hit worse," she said. I am fine." His hands did not leave her face. He was looking at her with that expression she had no word for yet. The open, unguarded one that only appeared in unguarded moments and which she suspected very few people had ever been allowed to see. "I thought," he started, stopped, started again. "When I got the alert that you had not arrived home and your phone was on the street." "Hey," Adana said quietly. "I'm here." He pressed his forehead to hers. His eyes closed. She felt the slow exhale move through him like something releasing. Behind them she could hear his men, the sounds of Ryu being restrained, voices giving and receiving orders in low tones. "What happens to him?" she asked softly. "He will never see daylight again," Cho Kang Tha said. "I will make certain of it." "Don't kill him." He opened his eyes. I looked at her from an inch away. "Adana," If you kill him in this warehouse tonight, you carry it differently than everything else, she said. I know you. You will carry it differently, and I am not going to watch you become something you cannot come back from. She held his gaze. He goes away, forever, but he lives. Cho Kang Tha looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned his head toward his men. Take him, he said. Maximum security. No contact, no daylight, no exceptions. The sounds of Ryu being removed from the warehouse faded. Then they were alone in the space, forehead to forehead, the smoke clearing slowly around them. I love you, Cho Kang Tha said. He said it the way he said everything. Quietly, without performance, like a fact he had finished deliberating about and was now simply stating. Well, I have not said those words to anyone in 5 years. I was not certain I still knew how. His thumb moved against her cheek. But I love you, Adana Obi. I have from the moment you looked at me and did not look away. Adana felt the tears come and did not try to stop them. You are, she said, the most terrifying, impossible, complicated, ridiculous man I have ever met in my entire life. Yes, he agreed. And I love you too. His forehead pressed harder against hers. She felt him exhale again, slower this time, deeper, like a man putting something down that he had been carrying alone for a very long time. Marry me, he said. That was a command. It was. Cho Kang Tha. A pause, then quieter. Adana Obi. Will you marry me? You still do not have a ring. I will buy you every ring in Seoul. That is not how proposals work. It is how mine work. She laughed. In the middle of a warehouse, with a bruised shoulder and rope marks on her wrists, and the remnants of smoke still drifting in the air around them, she laughed, and felt it move through her like the first warm day after a long winter. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. 1 year later, Adana stood on the balcony of their home on Jeju Island watching the sun go down over water so blue it looked invented. The evening was warm. The celebration inside, her mother, his few trusted people, the loud and joyful collision of two worlds that had no business finding each other, was audible through the open doors behind her. Arms came around her from behind, his cologne, his warmth. On his particular steadiness that she had long since stopped finding intimidating and now found simply like home. Your mother is looking for you, he said against her temple. My mother can wait 2 minutes. She is threatening to come out here herself. She will not. Adana turned in his arms, looking up at him, her husband, still a strange and wonderful word, and found that expression on his face. The real one, the one that was entirely hers. I have been thinking, she said. About how this started. She tilted her head. I texted the most dangerous man in Seoul that my body was ready. By accident. Something shifted in his face. Not an accident, he said. Cho Kang Tha. Fate, he said simply. It was fate. Adana looked at this man. This complicated, reformed, extraordinary, why impossible man who had shown up at her door at 11 p.m. and somehow never really left. Who had seen her, completely, consistently, without agenda. Who had put down 5 years of grief because she had looked him in the eyes and asked him to be better and meant it. Fine, she said softly. She reached up and touched his face. It was fate. So loves, that is the story of how one accidental text, sent in a moment of desperation to completely the wrong man, rewrote Adana's entire life forever. She was never supposed to reach him. He was never supposed to come. But here's the thing about fate. It does not ask for your permission. It just moves. Now I need to know. Did you see Ryu coming from the very beginning? And be honest, would you have opened that door? Drop a comment and let me know everything. If you love this story and you want more drama, more romance, and more Afro-Korean love stories, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any upload. Share this video with a friend who loves a good romance, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.